else above you. You never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows why.
No one is Brian. Brian is alone. His music is alone, and no one can create music like Brian.
The feel was right, the notes were right, the harmonies were right.
Imagine not only writing all that material, but defining California mythology.
The music spoke to us because he was one of us.
His insight was absolutely incredible.
He was like Atlas Shrugged, you know, he had to hold up the world. That's what he was doing each time he made a project.
Mozart probably had his problems too.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
On a sunny morning in 1913, water czar William Mulholland dedicated the new Los Angeles aqueduct, designed to bring water to the arid basin. He gestured to the desert below and declared, "There it is, take it." In a city that invented itself, people came to reinvent their lives. While Hollywood idealized life in California, generations of migrating Midwesterners came to live it. The Wilsons were one such family. Murray and Audrey Wilson shared a love of music and a hope for a better life than their parents. He was a moonlighting songwriter. She was a homemaker. Brian Douglas Wilson was born June 20th, 1942, a healthy baby with wide hazel blue eyes. Brother Dennis came soon after in December 1944. Murray and Audrey put down $2,300 for a small two-bedroom house in Hawthorne, the city of good neighbors. A third son, Carl, arrived in December of 1946.
It was Ozzie and Harriet. It was a post-World War II housing tract. It was the type of home that I grew up in. You know, that's why I could relate. That's why our generation could relate to Brian and his music.
Southern California is a young area with young thinking and modern planning.
By day, Murray worked in Hawthorne's top industry, aviation. His songwriting aspirations peaked when band leader Lawrence Welk played Murray's composition Two-Step Sidestep on his weekly radio show.
In that household, you'd have Audrey, who was an absolutely beautiful person, on the organ, and Murray sitting at the piano, crooning out melodies in his very, brusque voice. He'd go, oh, do. He'd be doing singing these melodies, and he just was impassioned by music.
As a father, Murray played dictator. Disobedience was often met with a blow or a humiliating punishment. He once tied Brian to a tree for misbehavior. The boys quickly learned that their father's soft spot was music. As a child, Brian had loved the music of George Gershwin. As a teenager, he discovered the Four Freshmen, whose jazz harmonies he spent hours dissecting.
I used to teach him Four Freshmen harmonies like, it's a my dad, my mom, and Carl and I. And Dennis wasn't good enough he was too stupid to learn. But the four of us would just sit there and just harmonize, and we loved it.
Murray and Audrey took the boys on trips to the newly opened Disneyland, billed as the happiest place on earth. Brian loved riding the Matterhorn and eating the peanut brittle on Main Street. As they grew, the boys' personalities emerged. Carl, the baby of the family, was sweet and introverted. Dennis was the rambunctious troublemaker whom neighbors dubbed Dennis the Menace. Brian was special. He was deaf in one ear, some said from a blow by Murray. Still, he had a gift for music.
He was always the person who sang. And then some people who went to a certain church heard him and they thought he was wonderful. He was.
Murray obviously recognized early on how gifted Brian was as a little boy and made sure that whatever lessons they could afford Brian got, made sure that whatever equipment Brian needed he had.
At Hawthorne High, Brian was a decent student and a competitive athlete, center fielder in baseball, and a quarterback who could throw a football 65 yards. classmates found him shy, sweet, and goofy.
Brian's way of communicating with people was through his humor, as well as through his music. His biggest gift to somebody was to get him to laugh or to play him a song on the piano in later years in high school.
I think if you look at the picture of Brian on Senior Ditch Day, you sense immediately that he was apart from the group and yet at the same time wanted to be part of the group. And that almost sums up his experience with the Beach Boys.
Hawthorne Boulevard was one of Los Angeles' great cruising streets, running 6 lanes wide. Brian patrolled the streets in his most prized possession, a '57 Ford Fairlane that Murray had given him. Brian also loved singing and laughing with his cousin, a cut-up named Mike Love. In years to come, their vocal blend would become the core of Brian's music.
There's a story told of a very gentle boy and the girl who wore his ring.
He heard the intricate harmonies there and the beauty of that type of singing. It blew his mind. He came home every day from school and practiced that.
For their hearts were full of spring.
Something like that, I think, is a gift from God, really. I mean, the sound of their voices together. It's a singular instrument.
He approached it almost like I would say, a prayer, a moving prayer, in the sense that we think of prayer as something sacred and silent, but a joyous prayer, something like almost gospel.
In the fall of 1960, Brian enrolled at El Camino Junior College, where he became reacquainted with Alan Jardine, a fellow Hawthorne Cougar, and another fan of the Four Freshmen records.
And he just pore over these recordings until he got it as close as he could on the piano. And then he'd call me up, and mostly to just cut our teeth, testing the water, see where we could go vocally.
We're full of spring.
Youngest brother Carl loved rhythm and blues music and tried to convert Brian.
And he's going, hey, listen to this, Brian. Listen to this. And then you hear this. Hey, baby, ain't nothing wrong tonight. Hey, mama's got a baby. Mama's had a baby tonight. You know, and I thought, what is this? You know. And a couple of years later, I said, oh, I see.
Brian's 16-year-old brother Dennis had become more of a truant than student, spending most of his time at the beach, 6 miles west of Hawthorne. Mother Audrey insisted the boys include Dennis in the group. Although he couldn't play an instrument, he became the drummer. In August of 1961, Murray arranged an audition with a mom-and-pop publisher in Hollywood. They loved the harmonies but thought the boys needed an image. Dennis mentioned his latest pastime.
He told me, he said, we should write a song about surfing. And then Mike goes, bop, bop, dip, and I go, it fell together so fast you wouldn't believe it. Made our heads swim. I mean, our heads were swimming.
Okay, boys, slate, this will be take one surfing.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me. Now surf, surf, with boom, boom, dip, 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 boom, boom.
Brian and Mike wrote the song over Labor Day weekend, and by Thanksgiving had a single on a small LA label. They called themselves the Pendletons. But when the 45s were pressed, they found their name had been changed. The first time the boys heard the song on local station KBLA, Carl got so excited that he threw up. Dennis called it the all-time moment.
Oh, it was a thrill. Are you kidding? I was out of my mind. I went out of my mind. I was so thrilled.
Surf, surf.
Murray Wilson appointed himself manager and ferociously set about promoting and molding the Beach Boys. He tried to get his son to surf for the band's image, but Brian refused. He was afraid of the ocean. For Brian Wilson, it would always be about